Hey everybody, it's Dr. Hayes. Sorry we weren't able to have lab today, but with the university postponing till 10, it only would have given us 45 minutes, which, face it, would have been a long enough time for us to take a quiz, get some instructions, and then leave. And most of you guys are traveling from a far enough distance away that I didn't think 45 minutes was worth it. Luckily, we had 2 weeks scheduled on the syllabus for this topic, so if you take a look at your syllabus, you'll notice that this week and next week we're scheduled for Lab 6A on the tissues. So with this video, along with some information that I've sent you, we should be able to get everything finished next week and not be at a loss of any of the material. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure you check your DSC email. In there, I provide the handout that you would have gotten in lab that gives you kind of a heads up of the material that you're going to need to focus on when we get in lab next week. It's a tissues lab, so you're going to be spending a lot of time looking at microscope slides, learning how to identify the different types of tissues. So what I do over the course of the week is make sure you go through and read Lab 6A really thoroughly. I've outlined on the handout the specific tissues that you need to know, so when you get in there next week, we can just hit the ground running and start looking at the slides. The other thing we covered in the Wednesday lab that I'm going to use this video for is we talked about how to prepare for one of my tests and how my test and my multiple choice specifically may be a little bit different than the multiple choice questions that you had on tests before. So there's this really cool thing in education called Bloom's taxonomy, and you probably can't see this. I have no idea if it'll work. It really doesn't. What you can do is you can Google Bloom's taxonomy, and basically it's just this hierarchy of how we ask questions and figure out how much people know. And it starts with really simple questions, which are called knowledge questions. And these are the kinds of questions you've probably seen on a multiple choice before. For example, in which of the following organelles is ATP made? A, ribosome, B, mitochondria, C, nucleus, or D, lysosome? Right? The answer is mitochondria, and all that question requires you to do is to have memorized some information from your notes and then regurgitate it on the test. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't really tell me if you know and can apply the information. So my focus is around the middle of Bloom's taxonomy. It's on this level of application. So basically this means, can you take what you know and apply it to a new situation? So, for example, muscles in our body require a great deal of ATP. Which type of organelle would they be most likely to have a lot of? A, nucleus, B, ribosome, C, mitochondria, or D, lysosome? So the answer is still mitochondria, but now you've been forced to apply that information to a new situation, right? We didn't learn about muscle cells, but given the information in the question, you can deduce what we're talking about. Now, the very, very end of Bloom's taxonomy is something called evaluation. And for those of you going into the healthcare field, this is what you're going to be doing every day. You're going to be looking at a patient and looking at their symptoms and judging that against the knowledge that you have. So our goal as you progress through school is to work you higher and higher and higher up Bloom's taxonomy so you're able to evaluate a patient or a situation in your life using the information that you've learned. So what I've done is if you go on Georgia View D2L, you'll see a little section that says Exam 1 Student Submitted Questions. And I've already made a post in there that gives you 7 examples of good application questions. And you'll notice that they often start off with a story. You know, your little brother got shot in the gluteal region. Where was he shot? That was a question we used in lab last week. Great application question. So take a look at those 7 questions, and those should give you a good feel for how I'm going to ask questions. Now, what you guys have to do as an assignment is make a post on that forum in Georgia View and post 3 original application questions. Now, I know there are some in the textbook, and of course you can use those to study, but I prefer that you come up with original questions, and they can be over any of the material that we've covered so far. Chapter 1 in lecture, Chapter 2 anatomical terminology, the organelles, any of that's fair game. And we'll start hitting chapter 3 in class next week. So if you've already done that guided reading and want to write a question on that, by all means. So those questions need to be posted by Wednesday at noon. Now here's the upside. On every single test, we'll do this activity where you'll submit questions. So there's 24 people in your lab. You're each submitting 3 questions, which means there's going to be a ton of questions for you to use to prepare for your exam. It's like you're writing a study guide for yourselves. And the other thing is I always pick at least 4 student-submitted questions to include on the exam. I usually put a little smiley face next to them so you know which questions were submitted by your classmates. So if you write good questions, there's a pretty good chance that your questions could show up on the exam, and they should be pretty darn easy for you to answer since you wrote them. I had a student last semester wrote great questions. All 3 of his questions made it onto one of the exams, so those questions were definitely a breeze for him. So hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea about the types of questions that we're looking for. If you have any questions over the course of the next week, by all means ask them in lecture on Tuesday or Thursday. Swing by my office hours or use my virtual office hours on Tuesday night, and we can talk about your questions. I'll try and peruse that board over the course of the next couple of days and maybe make suggestions if I see really good questions or questions that could maybe use some work to give you a little bit of a hand with that. I hope you guys are staying warm today and enjoyed your day to sleep in. I'll see you guys in lecture on Tuesday.